Hi there, I'm Jacqueline for Vero, and today we're going to learn all about the traditional or champagne method of making sparkling wines. We'll start from the basics, identifying the types of grapes that can be used, moving on to the techniques, and stick around to the end where we give some examples of sparkling wines to try. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. First of all, what characterizes a sparkling wine made from the traditional method? Their main trait, like a lot of sparkling wines, is freshness and acidity. Then comes these yeasty flavors of bread and brioche. But first, let's talk about how to get that freshness and that acidity that complement the sparkly bubbles so well. The grapes used to make these wines often come from cooler vineyards. This is because they are situated in more northern regions, like in Champagne, or they are located at higher altitudes, some places even reaching over 2,500 feet. Or because they benefit from some kind of a moderating cooling factor, like the cool breezes off the San Pablo Bay in Sonoma, California. With cool factors like these, the grapes might struggle to ripen, and thus they have a lot more fresh acidity left to give the finished wine product. The grape variety also plays a large part too. Not all grapes are well suited for this winemaking style. The grape needs to retain their acidity and the freshness, but also still create appealing fruity characters and flavors. The varieties most commonly used to make sparkling wines with the method champenoise are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. These are the king and queen of sparkles, as they are used all over the world to make sparkling wines. But in many wine-growing regions, more indigenous and less international grape varieties are now used more often to make sparkling wines in the traditional method. These need to be, again, varieties that can maintain high levels of acidity and fresh and fruity aromas and flavors. A great example of this trend is from the winery Sandro de Bruno, located near Verona. The volcanic soils of the Soave region, where it's located, gives the local grape variety Durella the perfect balance of acidity and structure to make a great sparkling wine. Here, the acidity and the fruity notes of the Durella grapes are complemented by yeasty flavors that Sandro crafts in his cellar. And that brings us back to these bready, yeasty flavors that make you think of bread, brioche, croissants, and freshly baked cookies that are common aromas amongst traditional method sparkling wines. But where do these peculiar characteristics come from? Well, first, we must understand how the traditional or champagne method works to create sparkling wines. First, you must start with a so-called base wine. The process to obtain a base wine is pretty much the same used to get a regular still white wine. The grapes are pressed as quickly and gently as possible to extract the juice, and then the first fermentation occurs to start obtaining a light, low alcohol, high acidity white wine. This wine is now bottled along with the so-called liqueur de tirage, a mix of sugar, mostly unfermented grape juice, and extra yeasts. These bottles are then sealed using a bottle cap like you see on a beer bottle and stored horizontally at a low, constant temperature. The extra yeasts start eating the sugar and a second fermentation begins. Except this time, the bottles are sealed tightly and the CO2 generated by the fermentation can't go anywhere. The highly soluble gas gets absorbed into the liquid, and that's what creates the carbonation and bubbles that we love so much in sparkling wines. When this second fermentation is finished, usually after 4 to 6 weeks, the wine is usually left to rest in the cellars, still with the dead yeasts, called the lees, in the bottle. These are what will give a wine the typical bready notes that we talked about earlier. The process is referred to as aging on the lees, and how long a wine can spend in this step varies greatly from product to product. The more time that a wine spends on the lees, the more bready notes that we will find in the glass when tasting the final product. Most premium wines are required to spend many months aging on the lees, starting from 9 months for some cavas, and there's even some champagne vintages that require over 36 months. Obviously, the longer time spent aging on the lees, the more premium the wine becomes, as this aging time is a considerable investment for the winery, and some will even let bottles sit for 100 months, which is 8 years. Once the winemaker decides to stop aging the bottles on the lees, the next step is called the riddling or remuage. Bottles are placed with the neck facing downward and then are meticulously turned by hand on riddling racks, also called pupitre. In large wineries, things have also become more mechanical with the advent of gyro pallets, which are automated riddling machines The bottles are loaded into cages, and then the machine moves and tilts the bottles in the necessary directions. In both methods, the bottles are gradually tilted and rotated, eventually ending nearly upside down. And why all this hullabaloo? Well, remember that we still have all of those dead yeasts and lees in the wine and in the bottle. This can make the final product cloudy, or it can change with time. Think like pet nat wines. So the winemaker, they need to get rid of it to make a traditional method wine. And with the riddling, these gentle movements loosen the lees and coaxes them down all together into the neck of the bottle. It's a slow process, and hand riddling can sometimes take up to 8 weeks to be fully completed. Once all the lees are collected in the neck and bottle cap, sparkling wines go through dégorgement, where the lees are removed. In the past, it was a very difficult manual operation that needed lots of skill and perfect timing to be efficiently accomplished. But nowadays, technology helps a lot. First, we chill the bottles to roughly 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 7 degrees Celsius to prevent excessive foaming and loss of the CO2 bubbles. Next, the necks are plunged into a cold brine bath of -16 degrees Fahrenheit or -27 degrees Celsius. This rapidly freezes the yeast sediment into a solid plug without freezing all of the wine. This bottle is then opened, and the built-up pressure ejects the plug. The goal here is to minimize the sediment remaining in the bottle and to minimize wasting the wine expelled with the violent exit of the plug. After the dégorgement, it's inevitable that some wine gets expelled. To replenish it and keep a healthy level of wine in the bottle, the winemaker will add directly to the bottles the so-called liqueur d'expédition. This French term refers to a mixture of wine and sometimes sugar that is used to top up the bottle. And more importantly, this also determines the final sweetness and sugar content of the product. The amount of sugar added in this liqueur can vary, and it's more or less the choice of the winemaker with certain regulations. You will often find stated on the label terms that refer to the residual sugar expressed in grams per liter. That tells you a little bit about the sweetness that you can expect inside. Traditionally, sparkling wines once leaned towards sweeter styles like dry or extra dry. However, there has been a growing trend for Brut Nature, no added sugar, and Extra Brut, very low sugar sparkling wines. After the liqueur has been added, the bottles are then sealed with the recognizable mushroom cork, which is significantly thicker than regular corks. After all, remember that within the bottle, there's normally about 6 atmospheres of pressure. This loaded pressure is also why the wire cage is added to help keep the cork lodged in the neck and not shooting out like a missile. Lastly, of course, this last phase is traumatizing for a wine. So normally the bottles are left to rest and snooze for a moment before heading off to our wine cabinets. Wow, what a process. It's amazing to think about all the work and crafting that goes into just one bottle of traditional method sparkling wine. And just as a note, these wines are often referred to as traditional method or metodo classico and not champagne, even if they're made in the same way as champagne. This is because, as many of you probably already know, only wines made within the boundaries of the Champagne area in France can actually be called champagne on the label. So if you're looking for some metodo classico or traditional method wines to taste, check out the Vero shop linked down below. You can find the wines of Sandro de Bruno that we mentioned earlier, and also Ivaldi's Alta Langa, which is a Piedmonte sparkling wine. Both of these are from northern Italy, and they have 30 months or more of aging on the lees. Thank you for joining me today. If you learned something new about how to make traditional method wines, leave a like and let us know in the comments below your favorite traditional method sparkling wine. I'll see you with the next video. Bye!